So when Rahul said a lot of things happen here, it's because digital public infrastructure journey, much of that work, takes a decade. It takes a decade to build an infrastructure again, quite like physical infrastructure. It's long, persistent, across political parties. You have to navigate multiple, leaderships, multiple bureaucratic leaderships, whether it's METI or whether it's in PMO or wherever, and actually keep pulling it off, keep making it happen, right? But what we are seeing is that I think India has mastered the playbook, the way of thinking. And that is what really we brought together last year under G20. By the way, it's not only India was doing. Brazil is doing, Thailand is doing, few of these pieces of the puzzle, especially payment. Payment and ID are very common things that you would see other countries trying to do, because it makes sense to do for them. But it's not obvious that any other country has actually a systematic playbook that has created repeating the same approach. DPI is not one thing. DPI is not a thing you can buy. DPI is a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching the problem statement. Large, complex, multidimensionally complex problem statement, and trying to figure out what is that we can do at the core that allows that problem to eventually get resolved. And most importantly, when we did DPIs were always seen, even today, our infrastructure, Aadhaar or UPI or DigiLocker, must be seen only as a necessary condition and not sufficient. It's not sufficient to solve problems. Much more to do. And as you go through, you are in the thick of it. And while IFS, you might not be that much into it, but rest of your counterparts who are in IAS and IRS and so on, they'll go through this journey, right? Where problem statements continue to pile up for India. These are complex. Health, for example, access to primary care, we are horribly behind. Access to justice, terribly behind. As a country, much to do, right? Going to court is like a denial of service attack, DOS attack, as technologists call it. I'll take you to court. So it's important that India looks at these investments, and you should have a mental model. When you say invest in infrastructure, it is similar to saying invest in the highway, and the economic benefit of the highway will be reaped over time, provided your countries you're opening up the businesses, your leadership is not going down the drain. Many things have to happen for economic boom to happen, right? But it's a necessary condition. Ask the reverse question. What if you did not have the highway? Can you afford not to have the electricity grids? Can you afford not to have the highways? Can you afford not to invest in mobile connectivity? But would that solve people's problem? Not at all. Remember, that's point number one. DPIs don't solve. They are necessary conditions that we must do, and that what we call it distributes the ability to solve later for us. Very, very key important part, because a lot of times we tend to try to solve a problem. But India has taken a slightly different approach. We said, no, let's look at long term. And let's invest in the underlying building blocks, Lego blocks, that are infrastructure in nature, that can subsequently come in handy to be able to solve more complex problem when these building blocks come together. Literally, a couple of months ago, a reporter said, now it's Aadhaar is 2009, 15 years, 14 years later, 15 years later, have we solved India's problem? I said, mad? We are not going to solve India's problem that easily. We are like the center of all the problems in the world. And with scale of 1.4 billion, most populous nation on earth, we are going to have a lot of problems for a long time to come. Okay? But we need a method to the madness. We need a method to address this systematically and not a point solution. You can't force a doctor and a hospital to be created in the villages. 700,000 villages. We are now going to have doctors and things. So how do you get primary care? But we asked the same question. In 2014, we asked the same question. If banks are not going to go, why? How much of a number of force you can put? Even with our public sector bank, it's only so much they can do. Why? It's not economically viable at all to start a branch to force officers go and live there, bank, because their children want to be in good schools. They want to be closer to tier 1, tier 2 places. So they don't go. Banks don't start because it's not economically viable to open a bank branch. But remember, 2023, when we look back, what did we solve? We still see banks have not gone. But banking has gone. We never managed to get banks to villages. We managed to get banking to villages. So we are now addressing the verbs and not the nouns. There's a distinct difference in that. There's a difference in that thinking. Because suddenly it opens a possibility in our mind. The old ways of forcing an institution to go there may not be needed in the digital realm. If we are able to actually stretch ourselves digitally and provide like teleconsulting, telemedicine. Could we give telemedicine? Could doctor be here, but actually still care with our ASHA worker in the front? Sure, we could do that. But then you start asking other questions. But where does the medicine supply come from? Where does the equipment supply come from? You keep unbundling these problem statements and ask this question all the time. Why is it important to ask the question? The only way to solve something at scale, India scale and diversity, is to unbundle these problem statements and ask what is the commonality among these problem statements and see whether we can extract that and create a highway or the commonality as a reusable building block, infrastructure, whatever you want to call, right? Reusable element. If that many such reusable element comes up, it's like the Lego box with different pieces of the puzzle. Now, suddenly, a health tech company or even a government, private or public, innovators can innovate on top of it. To give you an example before we jump into specific. Zerodha. Heard Zerodha? Okay. SEBI, when 2015, SEBI, our regulator, capital market regulator, was analyzing why do we have in India, why do we have only 22 million people participate in capital market? Why are we not getting more people? We have one of the most well-regulated mutual fund system in the world. Very well regulated. Why are everybody on the roadside investing in secondary and unregulated chit funds and non-chit funds and roadside investment, everything informal, right? They live in a completely informal world. We all live in the formal world. Formal banking, formal mutual fund, formal insurance, and everything informal for bulk of India. We asked this question. SEBI was asking this question. Why are we having so much difficulty in getting beyond 22 million? The magic number, by the way, is 25 million. You know how many credit cards in 2016 we had? 22 million. You know how many EdTech, all EdTech, including when Byju's at the good times, put together we have reached 20 million users. All the health tech put together, 20 million or 18 million. We see this, we hitting on the big wall. The wall beyond which it's non-economically viable to go after to the rest of the India. You are unable to penetrate and provide the services beyond that. Zerodha, this SEBI analyzed this and asked this question. Very, very interestingly, not all can be solved, many reasons. Habits, people don't have habits to invest in mutual fund. Most people don't even have money to invest in mutual funds. Forget it, right? So it is important to ask many questions. One such question was about cost. So SEBI asked this question, what is the cost of signing up a customer? If Zerodha is a distributor, this is known as a distributor, right? Mutual fund distributor, broker, they have broker license, they have distribution license, so they can actually say, go sell mutual funds. Mutual funds themselves don't sell. It was 1,500 rupees. Is the cost of KYC, know your customer, signing up forms, filling up the form, getting the form from the customer, keeping it, and simply acquiring a customer. For a broker, costed 1,500. How much commission a broker gets? 50 bips, 0.5%. That means if you sell, 100 rupees, I get 50 paise as a selling commission as a broker. So to recover 1,500 rupees, because that's my cost to sign you up, to recover 1,500 rupees, I need my customer to write a 3 lakh check, 300,000 rupees check. Because if you don't write 3 lakh check, 50 bips, 0.5% is 1,500, I can barely cut over. My cost can be covered only. How many people can write 3 lakh check in the country? 22 million people. It was amazing. That eye-opening thing, wow. Instantly, the moment that study was done, SEBI said, okay, let's come up with a new KYC policy intervention. By then, we had Aadhaar, eKYC. What did Aadhaar eKYC do? Aadhaar eKYC converted physical KYC into physical paper KYC and dramatically collapsed the cost. So today, SEBI's KYC cost is less than 20 rupees. That is from $20 to 20 cents. 1,500 rupees to 15 rupees. Cost reduction. What does it mean? Zerodha, and he publicly acknowledges this every time. Nitin Kamath says, as a founder, first 6 years, using paperwork, I could only acquire 60,000 customers. In the next 1 year, he acquired 6 million customers. Because as a startup, now you as officers is unblocking my way through policies and reusable building blocks like eKYC you can use, e-sign you can use, no more paper. DigiLocker, yes, you can use. UPI, of course, you can use. Moment SEBI said under 50,000, they started with 50,000, under 50,000 KYC, you don't need KYC, now it's actually 1 lakh, I think 1 lakh rupees or 2 lakh rupees. Below that investment, if you are investing crores, you still need the paperwork KYC, okay? But that's rich people, very few people. That's 22 million people. They had already taken care. Expanded. This is why our SIP investment, systematic investment, digital, paperless investment has exploded, which is great. Because now suddenly we have a massive, what's called expansion of the pie. The formalization of our economy is going beyond the top 50, 60 million people. In 2016, UPI, before UPI, 2016, we had less than 50 million people doing digital payments out of 1 billion adults. 950 million adults at that time, rough count, and 1.3 billion then, population now 1.4. 50 million, including Paytm. You know how much Paytm Karo ads and all that thing was going on at that time, right? Paytm brought QR code payments to India, actually, if you look at it, but only within the closed loop system. 50 million. That's what the word was. In 6 years, take a guess, what's the number right now? How many people do digital payments? From 50 million in 2016 in 2023, 7 years. 500 million. 500 million. Roughly about 500 million. 10x growth in 6 years. No country has ever shown the investment in one tiny thing called UPI. It's actually a tiny thing, UPI, by the way. really tiny thing. Actually, I can tell you, it's really small. But one intervention and one policy intervention from RBI to allow it, to allow fintechs to play, created that what's called a domino effect, exponential change that in the society we are saying. So what were we realizing is that digital public infrastructure investments India made is not about specific technology. It is not about somehow exporting our software. It is exporting our thinking. When you are in front of countries, you would be asked, what actually happened in this country? Don't tell me UPI can be used. Sure, UPI can be used in other countries. But they can also build their own UPI version. That's not the point. If you can get our good products there, congratulations to you, because that's a good diplomacy. Definitely, it's a good diplomacy to get it. But it's a way of thinking. You will be in front of every conversation, diplomatic conversation will start and you have no way to create diplomatic pathways or trade gateways or payment opening up between countries without digital underlying. Digital is a way to achieve what you want to achieve. It's not separated anymore from functionality here and digital guys here. It's no more. So it is important that you really internalize this idea. Okay? And UPI was that idea that began literally here in this building. FASTag began about the floor above. Every one of those efforts literally with 2 or 3 people thinking about it. UPI began in 2013, 2014 we were writing it, and 2015 we piloted it. Literally 3 people with NPCI, National Payment Corporation of India, is our main partner. But what is it? Why is it saying? Why is it simple? You know what is the investment we have made as in India? Now that's another question. A lot of people ask, a lot of countries. I engage a lot of countries, by the way, as part of either MEA invited sessions, G20 invited sessions, or otherwise, independently. Most questions are revolving around India can manage to do. Why? India is large. India has a lot of techies, and India has some money, relatively. Okay, we have money to invest. All 3 are wrong. All 3 assumptions are wrong. Why is it wrong? Do you know what is the spend India has made in digital infrastructure? Aadhaar plus DigiLocker plus eSign plus account aggregator, which Siddharth will talk about later, plus ONDC plus UPI. All put together. How much taxpayers' money has been spent? How many? 50. Okay. Any other number? She's saying 50. 50 crores for DigiLocker. 50 crore. Okay. Yeah. 50 crore for DigiLocker. You said 50 crore. No. 50 crore is really. Yeah. So we spent $2 billion, which is 16,000 crores. 16,000 crore over the last 15 years. Okay, this is not spent every year, okay. From 2009, then 2014, we upped the ante with Digital India. 2009 to 2014, we only had Aadhaar. Then Digital India came in 2015, we launched. And we launched eSign, DigiLocker, UPI. And then we subsequently launched account aggregator, and then subsequently now health and education stack and so on. Completely all put together $2 billion. India, finance minister, she stands up every time. She says, you know what is the ROI, return on investment for India? Only from our DBT program, direct benefits program, and only from central DBT program. Forget state DBT programs. Central DBT program alone, 300 programs. From center, 300 odd programs, is $34 billion savings for India. Forget every other inclusion story, UPI inclusion, you can see, women on the roadside selling coconut. All that is a good inclusion story, gender parity story, slowly and steadily. They're all ripple effects, but hard money saving. So what is it showing? That if you have an infrastructure investment approach, while it seems to be it's a long-term bet, every infrastructure is a long-term bet, but the cost of, unlike physical infrastructure, roads are costly, unlike physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure costs Nothing. UPI was literally $500,000 to launch. $500,000 is like rounding error. We don't even think about these numbers. You know how much JS spends? Joint Secretary spends. It's a crazy amount of money, okay? It's a lot of money we spend. Thankfully, we have a lot of money. India is good enough to spend. Right, wrong, and all we'll figure out where we will end up spending good way. But nevertheless, but it is actually not a money game. So second argument is that India has a lot of tech talent. Interestingly, we don't need tech talent. What was the size of our team? 150 people, entire organization. 150 people, tech organization, and including our outsourced software partner, 40 on an average, and actual tech internal team about 5. And we had 40,000 stations and 200,000 operators in the country. In 7 years, we gave 1 billion IDs with 150 people in your counterparts, your senior officials, right? That means a small organization with a small amount of investment, if only we leverage the ecosystem, banking, CSCs, and all the ecosystem we have and which we can leverage, which is what UPI we see. If you leverage the ecosystem, NPCI doesn't have to do the hard work, ecosystem does the hard work, and costs get distributed. PhonePe is okay to take the cost of going and sticking all the QR codes because they have a market valuation and market expansion game. Perfect. Why should government go do all that thing, right? So UPI is an example, and yesterday somebody was asking, so how long did you take to UPI design? It took a year for us to distill the UPI design. And the UPI design was literally 1.5 pages. 1.5 pages. That was UPI design. That created, last month we ended up with 12.5 billion transactions. 12.5 billion transactions is equivalent to MasterCard volume worldwide. UPI, right? So how did we achieve? It's not because NPCI or a finance ministry went and did all these things. It's because we bootstrapped a new playground, created a new ecosystem altogether. PhonePe didn't exist. In fact, I remember Rahul and Samir showing up in this room, this side room, and literally out of Flipkart and saying we are looking at a fintech company. We said, okay, we have something called UPI coming up. Do you want to play the game? And they played the game. Beautiful. They executed very well. It's fantastic to see they executed. Kudos to them. Entrepreneurial energy. It's not that we did it, they did it. But you create a new playground. We are, with ONDC, 1,000 plus, and Sujit is here to talk about the protocol behind it, and we have 40 plus projects around the world. 1,000 plus startups are being funded on a new playground called ONDC. So what is it happening? What is government doing? These three things. Invest in what's called a minimum infrastructure. Invest. Not much money, but think through it, invest it. What does it do? It unblocks some common friction among everybody. It creates a reusable thing and unblocks it. Then create a policy around governing that. UPI governing was important because it's money. Last year we moved $2 trillion on UPI. That's a lot of money. So people can't say, oh, I lost it, oh, I don't know when I'll get back and all that thing, right? It's money. So people are very, very careful. Governance of DPI is very key. It's like saying, I built the road, we have no rules. No, you can't do. You have to have rules on the game. Okay, so you create the rules. But real value, economic value, will come when you unleash market innovation. And you will be asked this question repeatedly, what's the story of DPI? DPI is not story of one particular tech. It's not one particular win. It's a way of thinking. India is doing this repeatedly, saying create the minimum building block, create governance around it, and activate a market. And we can do this repeatedly. In commerce, I don't know whether we have anybody from Bangalore, you will see Namayatri and mobility, travel, auto rickshaws and all that thing here. It's a completely decentralized, and we are moving towards a very different architecture. We'll talk about that later. So I think what is the real takeaway? Takeaway is that much of this, we have seen it before. Funny thing, we have seen it before. Where have we seen this before? Voter ID is not an infrastructure play. Tell me an digital infrastructure on top of which lot of innovation and the whole world changed. CoWIN was an app story, less of an infrastructure story. Internet itself. Huh? Google is a solution provider. So there's a difference between who builds a highway and who runs the private bus. Okay, think of that way. Android is a great example, but although it's a public sort of private-ish rail, little bit. It's open source, but it's quasi. They do have some control over the open source distribution. So nevertheless, they did a good job, because if you are left with only iPhone, it would have been tough for us. Smartphone wouldn't have penetrated. Android really created. Yeah, open source. Difference between. Okay, now it's a good question. What's the difference between open source Linux and UPI? Linux is merely a passive asset. It's lying there. When you apply Linux, use Linux somewhere, it becomes a DPI. The other part is called DPG. You would have heard that word, digital public goods. Linux is a classic example of a digital public good, open source, lying in. It's useful because I can reuse that. But when you actually, what's called deploy, when you use that in some environment to create an infrastructure, become DPI. Internet is a classic example of it. GSM is a classic example. By the way, there's a reason why you can pick up a phone and call your counterparty in France or your senior in France. Completely different machines, different SIM cards, different telco, different operating system, but voice travels seamlessly back and forth. How did it happen? It's not because Airtel and everybody wrote one app. Because somebody built something called a GSM protocol. And a consortium, GSMA alliance, came together to say, if you don't create interoperability, at humanity scale, we can't deploy this. Everybody will create a WhatsApp like closed loop. Airtel can only call Airtel, Airtel can only call Airtel, Vodafone can only Vodafone. What's the use? That would have been like a WhatsApp story. Today, WhatsApp and Signal and Telegram and iMessage and all not interoperable. Europe is trying to make it interoperable. Maybe we are late a little bit, unfortunately. Huh? RCS is a way to approach that. Very good. RCS is one open standard proposed to deal with that interoperability of messaging. But emails we can. I can send from my Google Mail to your Yahoo Mail and so on. Right? So pre-internet, until 99 or so, 2000, we did all the right things. And boom. And after that, it was all private tech players running away. Because government and standards organization could not go at the speed of the private industry. Private industry, if I were building private industry, if you were building a private company, I will create a moat. As much moat as possible so that you don't escape me. Why not? That's my private company. Everybody wants to be in WhatsApp, and so on, right? No big deal. But what is a story we are doing is that such closed loop systems have demonstrated it's not scalable to a large population, and it creates monopoly risk, which even US is discussing today. Forget Europe. Europe is big time discussing. Everybody other than US, because they're all US companies, right? Whether it's Uber or WhatsApp or Airbnb, everybody, Meta, everybody is US companies. So other than US companies, everybody is discussing this. Now, why is another requirement of DPI? Why another key requirement of DPI is sovereignty. Why is it a topic? During when the war broke out in Ukraine, almost instantly, MasterCard and Visa decided to shut off payment in Russia. We are not arguing geopolitically correct or wrong. Okay, that's not the argument we are here for. It's a question that your national critical infrastructure, that your society depends on, because without it you can't live digitally. If they start getting hostage and a kill switch is somewhere remote, you have a problem. Get used to it. You do have a problem. So we are, as diplomats, we are actually telling many countries, you need to think about two reasons why you need DPIs. Even developed nations. Developing nations, global south, they will happily somewhat relate to India. Same problem, same mess, same complexities. So they'll say, yeah, we see Brazil, Argentina, Peru, we'll see similar behavior. Global North, though, the developing nation somehow thinks DPI is not needed. But our real argument, even there, which many European nations are starting to realize, is twofold. One, how do you ensure national critical digital infrastructures? National critical infrastructure has you as your sovereign control over the infrastructure. Point number two, how do we make sure, how do you as country or a policy maker make sure that your startup, your local innovation ecosystem has any chance of playing the game? Otherwise, you are keeping quiet, right? You are saying whatever. It's almost in the form of digital colonization. In fact, it was used publicly in Washington a year and a half ago. In front of everybody, an African leader stood up and said, it is repeating, you are repeating digital colonization. Because I have no control, I have no idea as a policymaker. So these are very important decisions that you will be thrusted upon. So our DPI has actually demonstrated not only our own benefit. Of course, India is formalizing our economy from 50 million to 500 million. Now, Ayushman Bharat has reached 400 plus million people with health insurance and hopefully health and so on. Diksha has reached 200 million children under MOE. By the way, Diksha infrastructure with this extra foundation was actually helping build, has reached. And of course, Aadhaar has reached 1 billion people. So we have demonstrated for our own benefit that we have done. But we have also demonstrated that there is a method in our approach that allows long-term view of the playground. And you can invest in infrastructure, it does not cost much. And if you invest in infrastructure and create interoperability and fair market competition, then you can deal with monopolies or sovereignty issues, and most importantly, local innovation, entrepreneurial innovation. And that's what is resonating, whether we are in Paris or whether we are in, any of the countries that we constantly travel to, even in Washington, interestingly. Not in the Valley, but definitely in Washington, right? And and you will be part of those discussions sooner or later. Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you so much.